tell you something. From the last election to now, I feel like I have become I was a very sort of like, I had a political opinion, I cared, I was invested maybe in the political outcome. And since then to now, I've become somebody who's almost retreated into a bubble and become fairly apolitical. Like kind of like reclaiming a part of my identity that was very important to me, that I feel like I've like let go of, which was a very active participant of this country. Absolutely. And of the story of this country.
It's new year, new us, right?
It's also like, 3 months into the new year?
I feel like it's still January.
Yeah. And who's your best friend?
I have a comment on the previous answer. I'm also saying this because sometimes I hate working with certain generations of people where they just don't show up to work. Who's my best friend?
Yeah.
You!
Yeah. I like the way you ignored that question and started talking about work.
Come on, girl, you don't even...
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Don't Run Into Glass, a podcast hosted by thecitizen.in. I'm Gayeti.
And I'm Anica.
And Anica, it's nice to see you.
I know, it's been a while. It has been a while. What were we doing during this time?
Well, you got married.
Yes. I want to say I was thinking about this podcast hard and deep to make it amazing.
I mean, I want to add that we did every once in a while check in and be like, okay, we need to start shooting again and we need to, start with season 3. What's it all going to be about? But then those conversations sort of led to nothing. But now I think we're in the zone. I mean, I was a little preoccupied. I had another child.
Yes.
You were organizing your wedding.
Yes.
And I think we're ready to get back in the zone.
I know. In our new studio space.
I was going to say, actually, it's a lot of new new configurations. We have a new studio space. We have a new microphone, which has taken us 2 hours to set up. Let's not even talk about that.
We are so challenged where gadgets are concerned. But yeah, it's new year, new us, right?
It's also like, 3 months into the new year?
I feel like it's still January.
Yeah, time's flying. So Anica, now this episode is also a little bit about what new format of Don't Run Into Glass is going to be like. As I think you would be aware, we don't really have a guest for this episode, do we? Or is somebody going to sneak up on us and join us for this episode?
There is a haunted lady who lives in the studio. She might say hi, but no. I think this episode is about us kind of taking some time to talk to everyone who we speak to through this podcast. And I think go a little deeper into why we are even doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Starting with, why is it called Don't Run Into Glass?
Are you sure you want to tell that story? Because I feel like that's a nice
I have a deeper existential story, but I think it comes from a funny place, and both of us can't help ourselves but like tap into our old memories of, why we question things around us. But yeah, we can go. But first, I don't want to tell that story. Do you want to tell it?
I don't know if I want to tell that story because when we envisioned season 3 of Don't Run Into Glass, I think we wanted to intellectualize it more than we already have. You tap into your identity as an archaeologist and a historian, and I tap into my identity as a journalist, and you want to undo all of that with this story?
I think let's just keep it real, Gayeti.
Okay.
Let's just talk to people as to how and when we learned our life's biggest lesson one night.
Okay, Anica.
Okay, so I'll tell the story. The story goes like this. One night, Gayeti and me were in university outside this country. I will not tell you where. And we decided to go out on a Friday night. It just so happened that our other friends who were studying in the same country came and joined us on what turned out into a wild girls' night out.
Which was like every other night while we were there. But
yes,
we
lived, okay?
Perhaps
we lived.
wilder.
We lived. But We had a fantastic night of hopping from one place to the other. And when the night was absolutely closed, no place would let us in because we were just such savages. We went out on an excursion to look for some sandwiches in the middle of the night.
Actually, I don't think we were looking for the sandwiches. I think we were planning on just going home, and we saw the sandwiches, and then
we ran towards the sandwiches, except we didn't make it inside the store because the door was shut and we ran into glass. There were 3 of us women suddenly on the pavement holding our head because we banged our head against a pret wanting some, chicken sandwich in the middle of the night, but on the floor. I think that night...
By the way, I was not part of this. I was actually still in the cab, and I noticed
you were the one
that there was like a sort of like a little mountain of like 3 or 4 people that had all run to this.
3 or 4 women, all on top of it. She came to a pile-up.
Yeah,
she basically, she saw a pile-up. And
let's just cut the story there, because this also continued. There was, the night that followed, even though this was 4 a.m., there was still the night that followed. But I feel like that's maybe TMI for our audience.
Yeah.
But why, I think we wanted to answer the question, why don't run into glass? And we wanted to choose maybe something that had a metaphorical significance for our friendship. And
my metaphorical significance is the joke that if you don't know where you're going, please watch where you're going, because you will run into glass. So that's where Don't Run Into Glass came, because the next morning when we woke up, the 3 of us women did not know how
By the way, there were four of us.
4 women, how we got a bump on our head and how someone's got a bruise somewhere. We did not remember it at all. And I think that led us to posing the philosophical question.
And that's what I think this entire episode is a little bit. I think it's an existential question, because we've known each other now, Anica, like what, 20 years? We realized
20 years,
time.
Yes.
And of course, we've had moments like this crazy night and some crazier, equally crazy, wild nights and whatnot. But we've also kind of like seen ourselves grow up, right? Like I've seen you sort of do really, really well for yourself I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. I'm proud of you, Gayeti.
Yes. So I have, but I've seen you really sort of, whether it's your profile as an art historian or somebody who curates the Young Collectors, or did curate the Young Collectors program at India Art Fair. You work with the Archaeological Survey of India. And so I've seen that journey, and I feel like I'm very proud of you, Anica. So
I'm proud of you also, Gayeti. You have dealt with some big court cases, running an independent daily newspaper. It is not a joke. You have produced 2 gorgeous children.
They're very cute.
Yes. You have read multiple dogs. You have done so much with your life. At some point, didn't you also make a film?
I didn't really make it, but I'm included in the credits. So let's just...
Weren't you like anyway, that's a story for another time. The things that we have done, and we've watched each other grow, and we've come to the places that we have at. And I think one thing that we've learned from that is that despite how much we've studied, despite how much we've worked, despite how earnestly and long we've worked, we still can't be a master of anything. We're still like students in the school of life, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think this Don't Run Into Glass comes in from. It may seem like a clear path forward, but there are always different vantage points to look at the same thing, right? And that's what this podcast is about, isn't it?
It is. And I think where we want to transition to is, like we were discussing, we want to tell the story of India, but not as experts, because we're not experts. We still have like a lifetime of knowing our subjects, but more as observers of India.
Yeah.
And maybe even from a more personal perspective of our place in India today. And I think this is a very crucial juncture to like have this conversation, because we're heading into a new Lok Sabha term soon. We have the elections coming up.
It's a big year for the country. It's a very big year for the country. Yeah.
It is. And Anica, shall I tell you something? From the last election to now, I feel like I have become I was a very sort of like, I had a political opinion. I cared. I was invested maybe in the political outcome. And since then to now, I've become somebody who's almost retreated into a bubble and become fairly apolitical. Like I was actually not even sure if I'll be able to vote this time, because
the inconvenience of voting. I mean, let's just take a
beat
beat right now to talk about the inconvenience of voting. I also have moved my residence, and yet I still need to go to my native village to go ahead and vote. And I really want to vote. I think you and I both take voting really seriously, but I wonder how convenient, like for us, if we have to go to a far place in the middle of an actual job we are working, taking care of children, taking care of our house and everything, when we have to go really far to vote, how many people may have even bigger fish to fry on the day?
But the thing is, there is a simple solution to it, but it's not that simple, right? It would be as simple as a transfer of residence that would then, sort of change your voting from wherever this constituency is to where you're now based, right?
Yeah.
But how do you go about it? Do you have any idea?
I think there's a process. I think it's a quick process, but last when I tried to do it, it was like everyone's getting that done at the same time. So it's an overloaded system. I mean, the population of India does not really help something that even maybe fast track or tatkal, right? So yeah.
No, it is. I think it's a concern because I was like, I live fairly, like I now live in a completely different part of the city. And I was like, am I really going to, go and vote? And I remind myself that I used to be so enthusiastic about voting. I used to like tell everybody that they need to vote, they need to participate in like the political process.
Yeah.
And in the last 5 years, I've become more, I don't know, Anica, like I feel like if we're talking about the story of India, I want to admit that I become a little dejected, pessimistic. But yet at the same time, as we were discussing, there is tremendous opportunity for growth. We're a rapidly growing economy. There's so much.
It's a pretty special moment for India this past few years because the whole world is going through this really tiring recession. It's getting the whole economy tired outside essentially the rising global south.
Yeah.
And India is playing a really big important part in it. But while that is happening, I mean, yes, I totally hear you as to why it is such a strange time to live in. I mean, we're having wars go on around us, yet in India we just had the G20 summit where literally all of Delhi, all of the country was, spruced up for everyone. It was fantastic to have new water fountains. It was disheartening to see shutters put over bastis or, colonies that people didn't want other dignitaries to see, so they just covered them up. So things are happening, but yes, the world is looking towards India in a big way as the only economy that seems to be working forward.
So how does this tie into our season 3?
Well, I have an answer and then you think of an answer as well. My answer is because India is having this moment, it makes me extremely curious about the history of India. Has India had this moment over and over again? And whenever I look into that matter, I do see, yes. I also have a funny joke about it, is that when the world is going to shit, they're looking to India like, help us meditate over this, and India to the rescue. But no, India is not in the least to the rescue to others. But yes, it is doing really well for itself, despite everything that has happened in the past 10 to 15 years in the country. But somehow the attention is here, and it makes me curious about all the fantastic things that are happening here, but I want to look at it from a historical lens. What do you think?
I think for me, and I feel like, I was that person, that little child that used to like wait for the Republic Day parade to come on the television, and I used to stand at attention when the national anthem was played, and I have kind of like lost that patriotism or even that love for my country along the way, to be very honest. I really have. When I got married and my husband and I used to have this conversation about where we wanted to live, I was like, I'm never going to leave Delhi. And he was like, you're such a Delhi girl, you've got your friends here and you're so cliquish and you're so insular. And over time I've become that person who's quite disappointed. The pollution is terrible, the mosquitoes are buzzing around. I mean, I feel like I'm either escaping dengue, or I'm escaping like terrible AQI, or just one issue after another. And I'm not the biggest fan of like the overt chest thumping politicization that we're witnessing either. So I feel like what I would like to do through this podcast is maybe through rose tinted glasses reclaim or rediscover some of the aspects of India that I actually am really proud to associate with and that have really formed a very crucial part of my identity. And I think that's what I want to try and do with some of the questions that we're going to bring up this season. It's not just going to be like from a contemporary lens, it's going to be through a historical perspective. I think we do intend on doing a little bit of research, Anika, even though we say this and then you and I just meet for one of these podcast episodes without even reading one line or whatever research.
But in the past, we always had an expert who we went like little students of that matter. And tell us more about NFTs, and they would keep telling us, and we were like, yes, and then what happens if this happens? So we had a different way of going about understanding what's happening around us, and I think this time around we have a different way of going about it.
Yeah,
because I think one of the things that we came to the conclusion of, that one perspective, while it's so intriguing and so helpful, it just does not satiate our curiosity and satiate us knowing about that particular thematic. And I think we're also kind of zoning in a little bit into us. We're tapping into us a little bit more as to how would we like to know about these things by expanding the way we think about it. And that's what's like cool about this season, right?
Yeah, and I think even some of the questions that we want to address is like stuff that I've been curious about, but I haven't been able to really answer, right? Like even like, for instance, I'm interested in, let's say AI, right? Like AI in India's space in it. Historically, where has it been? Which direction is it headed? Who are the people we could speak to and bring on board? Maybe do our own research. So I feel like it's one of those, I want to say in a single sentence, I want to discuss questions that are not that easy to just put into ChatGPT and get like an answer. I want to like really look at you and me as like a historian, as somebody who works with the news, to deconstruct and contextualize some key questions that affect or should affect all of us. Like I think our first episode is going to be on female political participation.
Yes.
And I feel like that one is going to hit close to home because we're both talking about how we don't know if we want to vote this upcoming election.
Yeah, we're still making up our minds.
And I feel like that episode is important for me to like maybe even reignite my desire to be part of this political process, which has always been a very integral part of my identity. So I feel like I'm at a crossroads in even figuring out my identity as a active citizen of this country. I mean, I'm at a crossroad where I can be like, okay, it's just easier to live in my bubble and like not really engage with politics or the economy or society or whatever it is, just because that bubble is just so convenient. Okay.
But Gayeti, I don't blame if we choose to be in our bubbles. India is such a throbbing country. There's so much happening around us at all times, no matter what neighborhood you live in, that sometimes the bubble helps you think clearly. Right? It's if you're out and about, there are so many different kinds of people, so many different communities over here. Whenever we blame ourselves for being in a bubble, in a country like India, being in a bubble means something different, I think. There's culture, there's languages, there's food, it's a highly populous country, not unless you're living in a big farm yet. Someone's house is never too far away from yours. There's never a place of complete silence over here. Thus, if people choose to retreat into their bubbles, I don't blame them. I don't blame you. But yes, there was a time where I saw you chasing ministers during political rallies to get their bites in.
Or getting
and
into
I don't
fights,
see you doing that.
Getting into like sort of arguments at parties. Like I would go out on a Friday night and I would be so impassioned about like my political opinion that I would like get into an argument with someone and try and change their sort of perception or their point of view. And now I've like really retreated. So for me, like when we were discussing the question, what do I want season 3 to be? For me, it's also a personal project of like kind of like reclaiming a part of my identity that was very important to me, that I feel like I've like let go of, which was a very active participant of this country. Absolutely. And of the story of this country. And I think we want to like ask some fun questions when we discuss like the stories of India. We want to do some, of course, the female participation question is something that's a little bit more.
Yeah, female political participation is such an interesting thing, because I remember when we were talking about this as well. Remember I told you I was reading this book on old Indian queens, and it was so interesting to find out the circumstances in which they became queens about. But, I think that's what both of us want to do with this new season. I think with India coming through in a new way, whether you like it or not, that's not what we're saying, but it is a country that is transitioning. There are big things happening inside the country, not only for the world to see, but for the Indians to see and experience as well. You know, we've had huge political landmark decisions, huge cases in the Supreme Court regarding same-sex marriage that is being discussed so openly. The statements of the CGI coming and acknowledging that this is a matter that should be taken into acknowledgement, but we are not yet ready to give a clear judgment on that. From a huge developmental activity, we had the world's tallest statue made in India. Now we're making an even taller statue. Did you know that? We're making an even taller statue in India. I was watching a BBC clip on that. Like, India is not satisfied by the height of the statue. So, there's a lot happening. And I think with this podcast, what we want to help our viewership kind of experience with us by understanding what's happening in India right now from a historical lens and from a journalistic lens, we want to help all of us reconfigure our place in this country, right? There are big questions. There was, back in the day, we had a clear opposition. We had a clear political party that had very clear agendas. And now all of that is changing, evolving, molding to the current scenario, not only within the country, but also outside the country. And there's just a lot to unpack in this country. And I like to do it historically.
I also want to give a shout out to our history professor at LSR. Speaking of a historian and a journalist perspective, and when I told her that I was interested in political science, she said, oh, politics is the fluff. History is the real substance. And I kind of agree with that. Now, after being a student of history, I mean, we both met. And we both met as the most disinterested students.
But we did well for the amount of disinterest. So let's go back to this reference. What does this mean? Gayeti and me were first day first show BFFs from Lady Shri Ram College in
History
LSR.
Honors.
In history honors, yes. And I think I walked into the orientation 45 minutes late, and I saw Gayeti sitting with one foot on the chair and sitting there with this big curly Maggi noodles hair that she had, and she was sitting there, and I just looked with deep kajal. Do you remember that?
Yeah, my goth phase.
Oh my God, we all went through a goth phase. So she's sitting with that, and I remember I looked at her and I went and sat next to her, and that's when we became friends, and then we did history honors together.
Yeah. We strategically just attended a few classes, and then we chose not to attend.
We calculated attendance. We have crawled out of a Hindi class.
No, I didn't do that.
Was that with you?
No.
That was with another friend, Guilty.
Yeah, I didn't do
that. Yeah, we have done bad things. You guys have laughed at me when I was reciting a poem in the class and made me laugh, and then I got chucked out of that class because these girls wouldn't stop laughing. Anyway,
yeah.
So that goes back to me and Gayeti. But on this note, I think it's a good time for also the audience to kind of get to know us better. Not because you should really care about getting to know us, but I think you should know who are these people that are taking you on this journey with them, right?
So Anica,
some rapid fire questions.
Anica, tell me your deepest secret. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, definitely I would like us to delve into knowing each other better. So I'm going to ask you some questions, Anica, which we have not prepped adequately.
No, that makes it more fun.
What do you do?
I work in archaeology and I'm obsessed with art.
Oh, that is a quick and easy one. Okay, how many pets do you have?
I have 4 pets.
Your one biggest regret?
There are too many to count, yeah. I don't, I count my regrets more than I count my blessings, to be honest.
Your one biggest regret?
My one biggest regret is, gosh, I wish I'd studied law.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a nice surprising answer.
Or accounting. I would have been better with money.
I want to tell everybody about that one book that you read that basically defined your career
You've spoken
path.
about this enough on our previous podcast. Nobody wants to know. It's my turn to ask you the questions now.
No, I'm not done. We have more questions. Don't worry. Other than the don't run into glass night, tell me about another wild night that you've had.
I once went to a great party in another country, And somehow the crowd really bored me, so I fell asleep underneath the bar. And then the bouncer very politely asked me to leave because he thought I was making other people sleepy in the club.
This is definitely not your wildest night out, all right? You're giving us like a projection of Anica, the sweet girl that goes to sleep at parties. Most certainly that doesn't happen.
Some secrets are only for me to know.
Work-wise, something that you're very proud of having achieved, work-related.
I think what I'm proud, I don't want to count what I'm really proud of doing at work, but I do think that one work ethic that I think I'm very proud of where I'm concerned is loyalty. When I do pick up to do something, I stick with it and I see it, even if it's not my baby or my project, I love to see it to the end, and I like to work at it in a very deep way. Yeah.
And who's your best friend?
I have a comment on the previous answer. I'm also saying this because sometimes I hate working with certain generations of people where they just don't show up to work. Like PTSD. Who's my best friend?
Yeah.
You!
Yeah. I like the way you ignored that question and started talking about work
come
PTSD.
on, girl. You don't even need to ask me. We're running a podcast together.
Okay.
Yeah. Now is it my turn?
Yes.
All right, Gayeti. How many kids do you have?
2.
How many dogs do you have?
1.
How many dogs have you reared your entire life?
How many dogs have I had my whole life? There's no count. I mean, there's just
Have you ever lived without a dog?
No.
Okay.
Oh, I have. In between Guna and Neo, we didn't have a dog, and it was a very... I mean, considering the fact that I had a newborn and I desperately got another dog, it just goes to show that
you did not stand to that peer pressure. I think we were on that WhatsApp group just pushing you to get the dog because we also know that you're miserable without a pet in the house. Even though you have lots of, animals where you live, you have peacocks.
Yeah, but they're not my pets.
I know, you can't. They don't come charging on your bed when you don't want them. That's what you like about animals, right? All right. So what is the highest weight you have deadlifted?
I think... Well, between my 2 pregnancies, I think it was 100 kilos, but I think I've gotten to about 105 kilos before that.
What is your height?
My height?
Yes.
I want to say 5'3", but I know it's not.
What is your weight?
Right now?
Yes.
Right now?
Now this is what is your average adult life weight?
Like 45 kilos.
And how much did you deadlift again?
105 kilos.
So that's more than double the size of your body weight?
Yes.
Okay. So we have established that she's obsessed with deadlifting, but she's always been a very good horse rider as well. So Gayeti, if you had to choose giving up one thing for life, which one would it be? Weightlifting or horse riding?
I definitely, 100%, this is not even a difficult question for me, will choose horses and horse riding, even though I don't do it often enough. I just feel like it was such a defining moment of my childhood and is such an integral part of who I want to be and aspire to be. Even though it doesn't really fit into my daily life anymore, very tragically. I feel upset about it. But the Gayeti I aspire to be rides horses. The Gayeti I aspire to be doesn't necessarily lift weights.
Did you get a horse into LSR just to get your sports quota hours?
Maybe.
Yeah, while the others had to struggle. She's like, yeah, I got my NSO hours sorted. I'll just get my horse one day to the college. And they were.
It worked.
Yeah, it did. While Deepika and me were in Sarojini Nagar market buying sweatshirts for the sports fest. We were like, ma'am, please give us ours. We'll get sweatshirts for you.
I know. And I was just, sometimes life just works out in peachy ways.
Yeah, it does. Okay, I have more questions. What is the name of the movie that you helped make with your brother?
M. Cream.
Where can one watch it? Netflix?
Not anymore. Not on Netflix anymore.
But there was a time I watched
it.
Yeah, maybe. There was a time when I watched it online.
Yeah, it was on Netflix,
yeah.
but not anymore. I want to say Prime Video. Or just I don't know, get a torrent and
Who's your best friend?
No, I'm kidding, of course. Like we said. No, but I think that's what makes this podcast fun. That it doesn't feel like work. It feels like something. In fact, Anica, in between this little break that we took, we actually got on the phone and we were like, do we want to continue this podcast or should we just disappear? Should we just end it on this sweet note of whatever path it has taken? But no, we decided to do it because it's fun.
Yeah, and it's fun, and I think, it comes naturally for both of us to do this and share this with you guys, because I think since the time we've known each other for the past almost 20 years, we have, Gayeti and I, been on the phone. Yes, we gossip and we talk about everything.
No, we don't just gossip. Sometimes we call each other and we're like, give me gossip, and neither of us ever has any gossip.
We never have it.
We're like the most pathetic.
We're so disengaged people. We're just doing our own thing, so busy with our own important things. But the most amazing conversations that I've had with you is like calling you up and discussing about something I feel very passionate about, whether it is talking about politics, whether it's talking about gender identities, whether it's talking about different schools of historians. And, when we chance upon something, I think both of us can't wait to tell it to each other. But besides the sweet relationship that we have, I think what both of us value with each other is a really meaningful, open to criticism conversation that we have. And most times we are on the same page, but there are many times we don't agree with each other. And the way we actually kind of explain things to each other, I think we also wanted to share that with the world. Not that we are here to give you a lecture. We don't know anything. But we do want to talk about things that really beats our heart, and kind of talk about contemporary society today.
But exactly. But from I feel like what has helped me understand a lot of what is happening in India today or in the world today is whenever I do look at it from a historical perspective. Very honestly, like that helps me make sense of the world. The moment you remove the historian's training from analyzing what's happening today, it's very easy to get lost. But the moment you bring in the historical perspective, which is what I think we will aim to do a little bit more in this podcast season, we will look at questions that maybe might be of interest to anybody who would be watching, or people like you or me and our friends, and we want to like address those questions as like millennials in India. We are millennials, and also from slightly like a historical perspective. That's what we want to attempt to do.
And I think India is a super young country, right? And I think we have lived through that youth to come to a place where I think we can finally call ourselves full-blown adults now.
I mean, I hope so, but
and I think how we thought about certain things a few years ago, we are just a little bit more broader about how we think about things right now. So, I think I'm very excited for this. But before we go into that, I do think that we need to make our most important announcement right now.
Which is?
This is a season when we're changing our format, inviting different kinds of experts to talk about one particular topic. But this is also a season where we want all our viewers to participate. We want to be able to release the topic that we will be talking about a little bit in advance. And if you guys have any questions, we do want to take them on the podcast as well. So we want you guys to kind of engage with us, not for the social media numbers, but really try to dig our nails deep into a topic that tells a much wider, a deeper, a historically aware, and a currently relevant story of India.
Okay, so given that our first topic of conversation is going to be on female political participation, Anica, I want to ask you, have you voted in every single Lok Sabha election since you turned 18?
I think I have. I've missed 2 because I was not in the country, and that's my other, a bone to pick. Why it is possible for you to be in a foreign country and vote when voting is happening in your country, but why is it so inconvenient? It's a very complicated.
I don't even know what the process is to do that.
You have to go to an embassy or to an Indian office over there, and then there is something that you need to do. You need to inform them in advance, and these things keep changing as well. But actually, you are able to vote outside the country. If you're not in the country, but those are the years I was not able to vote.
And have you voted in every assembly election that
I have voted whenever I needed
What
to
about
vote.
the MCD election? Does your village come under the MCD or not?
No.
It doesn't?
No, it doesn't.
I guess not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
I really wish it does come under the MCD, because every village needs trash trucks, and trash trucks are sent by the MCD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But why doesn't it come under the MCD?
Because the panchayat or whichever organization is handling the village has to organize the trash management system, and
No, I said why, but how do we know like who then, if there's no municipal corporation, then it's the panchayat that handles the trash and things like that.
Yeah, whatever the, whatever they have to do in terms of the local administration, yeah. The SDM's office also can organize that. I don't know, but there's no trash truck coming.
There's no trash collection.
There was no trash truck coming to our village,
Yeah.
and there was always a dump yard where everyone dumped. And it is a bad state of affairs, honestly, when villages get urbanized. But that's another topic. Yeah.
Okay, so good.
Yeah.
At least you're a active political participant.
Yes.
In all processes.
And what about you? Have you voted for everything?
I think up till this point I have, but not the MCD elections. I mean, frankly speaking, it seemed like not that important, but now you realize it is also quite important.
I think for us, wherever we are living, that's the most important, because it directly affects us on the day to day.
And
the
I
other
want us
ones
to
are a
talk
little bit
about
more
that.
lateral. Yeah.
We will talk about that as well. But yeah, no, I have voted for the Assembly and the Lok Sabha elections. I once actually made a bit of a boo-boo. I thought my constituency was, I think, South Delhi or Central Delhi. I actually got mixed up in my constituency. Okay, I didn't know. I thought it was maybe Southwest Delhi, but it was South Delhi, something like that. And when I went to vote, the candidate that I thought, or the political party that I thought I was going to vote for, actually wasn't contesting that election. And so, and then I realized that they don't write the political parties' names in the when you have to press the button. It's only the symbol.
Sign. Yeah.
So then I was like, okay, I don't want to vote this one. I don't want to vote for that one. Then I actually was just like, I didn't know who to vote for. So I have to say, I just chose the symbol that I liked the best.
Yeah. And I think in this episode about female participation, we're also going to see people's how do people choose to vote.
Yeah. What are the things that matter? But what matters to you?
What matters to me? Well, what matters to me is obviously the political philosophy, number one, because everyone is also warranted by certain rules and regulations that you have to take care of A, B, C, D, E. So everyone is, kind of put on the same report card when you see development happening. But the political philosophy shows where it will take the country a little bit more intuitively. And that is the most important thing for me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I do feel, in this day and age, I've also become so skeptical with political philosophies. I feel like they're just a projection. They're not really, what they will actually do. Like, liberal parties claim to do so much.
Are there any liberal
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. They're not surviving. Nobody is surviving. But living in Delhi, I think we also can't be so divorced from the politics of it. But yeah, coming back to our first episode, that's going to be exciting, because through the lens of politics, we're going to understand historically what is female participation, and even take it a little further about what are the other communities that have begun to participate more actively in present day politics in India, and how is that diversity as compared to the rest of the world. I have a joke.
Okay.
When everyone in America was very excited about Kamala Harris becoming the vice president, I thought to myself, obviously it had to take an Indian woman to become kind of an important head of state figure, because the Americans will never do it. With their how much female participation have they had? We've historically had so much female participation. So yeah, I thought that, that was the joke to myself. But
it was not even funny. It was a terrible joke.
A joke with truth in it. But yeah, this is me being a bit snarky about it. America thinks it's so amazing. But
there's we will get into that conversation, because our female heads of state, etc., have always been largely been like wives or related to men in power in some way or the other. So how representative is that? So that is something that we will discuss, of course, in the next episode. But other than politics, Anica, is there anything else that means a lot to you or you would want to uncover in this season?
Yeah, I would want to, my fascination is always towards archaeology and history and culture in general. I do think there is a new fabric of an economic force that is coming about in India that is more regionally rooted. And has to do with not only the old traditions of craft in India coming onto the global stage. So that is something I'm very interested in. I'm interested in the ancient wealth of India, these do you remember at the Met Gala, there was this one content creator, Emma Chamberlain, who was wearing the necklace that is the necklace of the Maharaja of Patiala. And that really made me think that till today, the world, if it has to show opulence, there is always a reference to the old money of Indian Maharajas. The other day I was watching a show and was seeing a real estate property in France that was even that had an Indian palace.
Yeah.
You know, so there are some of these historically embedded topics that also speak about the wealth, current day wealth of India a little bit more. So that's more. But you also had some very interesting topics you wanted to explore.
I think
Biohacking.
I'm in like my health and wellness journey. Sort of, you know, I'm quite preoccupied with how can we better ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally. So yeah, I would be interested in sort of like looking at that space, but again from like India's traditional sources of knowledge as well. Like I feel like a lot of what we're discussing in the health and wellness space is also very well rooted in practices that were more sustainable and that have like traditional sources of wisdom, without being like in the mumbo jumbo land, you know, like the scientifically backed traditional sources of sustainable practices. So I feel like I'm definitely interested in that. So yeah, like biohacking I said because actually I don't know what it is. So I feel like I want to like uncover that a little bit with.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be very interesting because of exactly what you said, the root in ancient knowledge systems.
Yeah.
And them taking from that and bringing it back to life in terms of, I mean, there are some different kinds of mushrooms that people are consuming all the time. And I'm not talking about the psychosomatic.
I think you can get them off Amazon as well. I was checking it out.
Yeah. And you know, I think we spoke about these things a little bit earlier as well. Remember when we spoke to that lovely gentleman about a cannabis-based healthcare product that he was coming up with in India, and then we were making fun of like how bhang is a thing during Holi, and Holi is coming up. Wow.
Yeah. So those type of conversations, and I feel like for me another topic of conversation that's very interesting for me personally right now is motherhood. Obviously, I'm deep in my motherhood era. I think I've embraced it entirely. We did a episode last year on I think we called it Working Moms, and that was all about how like I didn't want like my mom identity to be my only identity, and how I want to wear all these different hats and be all these like, you know, different facets of my personality. And I'm right now at a phase where I'm like, it's okay if being a mom is my primary and only identity. I'm totally fine with it because it is all consuming. And maybe I'm saying that because I'm very still in my postpartum phase of like, you know, it's still just been 4 months since my second child. But I also want to look at motherhood and how that has changed, because India is such an interesting society as far as raising children is concerned. We have a lot of very traditional, very deeply rooted practices of community and, you know, sort of supporting women through community practices, which have changed a lot, you know. So I want to like from a personal point of view delve into
I think you speak for a lot of women when you tap into that aspect of yours. It's such an important part of our society, but at the same time the family system is so important in India, yet there are many countries that acknowledge the family unit financially through financial systems existent in their country, yet India does not. When you get married, people do not get any sort of tax rebate, whereas there are people who get married in other countries just for better financial management. And that to me still remains a very shocking feature, because sometimes in an average household, when you have especially a joint family system, many times you have one provider for the entire family, and they get absolutely no relief. And inflation has touched all of us deeply. We all live in that generation that, oh, my parents at 30 had bought a house, had 2 children.
I mean, that's not happening for any of us.
And now for all of us, I don't think we can even dream of that. I think takeout coffee and Zomato has eaten all our wealth, you know, any wealth that we made. Because, I mean, as the world is, so yeah, I think that you speak for a lot of women with that, with the thought on motherhood. but expanding it into the family unit is also something that I'm very interested in.
This is a really existential space we've gone down. Like, I want to this podcast season to address motherhood and health and wellness and political participation and activism. And I mean, I think it's a very weighty ask, but yeah, I hope to uncover some of it with you, Anica, my BFF.
Yeah, me too, with you and with everyone who's watching, because again, I think Gayeti and me are very, very aware of the narrow perspective we come from, and some of these topics, like motherhood, would have different people would have different vantage points of looking at it. So we really, really do want to invite you guys to participate in this season's podcast.
Yes, and also I feel like if anyone has, what we will try and do is maybe share some of the topics that we will be discussing on maybe our Instagram platform or something prior to recording it. And if any of our audience members would maybe like to send in a comment or even a short video of themselves speaking about the topic,
that would be so appreciated, actually.
We can weave that in, which means a slightly harder editing job for Hyder, who is tuned out right now. But
that's okay. Hyder is our biggest judge of our podcast. Sometimes we've ended a podcast and asked Hyder, "How's it going, Hyder?" He's like, boring. He just says one word. It crushes our spirit. But yeah, we never give him a hard time on those edits. Like, Hyder, can you please make it interesting? We never give him a hard time. But this time, I think we're going to take his critical feedback and try and do our very best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pinky promise. I think on that note, it's a good note to kind of end our episode 0.
Episode 0. And guys, please don't judge us, because this episode was really a little all over the place. It was just Anica and I just getting back into the headspace of...
I think it's also a feelings episode.
It's a feelings
We want to feel our feelings in front of you. We want to invite you to kind of feel with us. But we are serious. We do want to kind of do exactly what we're doing a little bit better, and we want to speak for an entire generation experiencing this country together.
And Anica, next time, please, when I ask you about your wild nights, don't talk to me about falling asleep at a club, all right? That's just pretending to be someone you're not.
I think you are just here
bring your
to
authentic
defame me.
Bring your authentic self to this podcast.
Well, I'm as authentic as possible.
That was not authentic, but okay.
Very authentic. There are many facets to
Okay, cut.
Okay. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.